Emily Hunt thought the worst moment of her life was breaking up with Brandon Tyler. She was wrong. Just 2 months later, her entire family was slaughtered in their home, their lives extinguished in a single night of calculated horror. Now, as investigators scramble to track a killer who's vanished without a trace, one chilling question remains. Did Brandon do it? And if so, what is he waiting for next? This is the story of the Hunt family murders, a case where obsession turned deadly, and the one person left alive may still be the final target. The town of Greenfield, Oregon, sat quietly beneath a canopy of pines, where the streets curled like lazy rivers through clusters of manicured homes. It was the kind of place where parents walked their children to school, where mailmen knew your name, and where bad things simply didn't happen. At the end of a peaceful cul-de-sac stood the Hunt family home, a 2-story brick house with shutters the color of forest moss and a freshly mowed lawn that seemed to always glisten with dew. To everyone who passed by, the house radiated stability, warmth, and something else, something harder to define. It felt untouched by the world's chaos. Safe inside the house lived Michael Hunt, a respected architect known for designing much of the town's public spaces, and his wife Brenda, a beloved high school literature teacher. They had 3 children. Emily, the eldest at 19, had just started her 2nd year at Oregon State University. Her younger brother, Trevor, was 16, athletic and well-liked at school. And then there was Sophie, the youngest at 10, with a wild imagination and a growing fascination for painting the sky in every shade of pink and orange. To their neighbors, the Hunts were the kind of family people quietly admired and sometimes even envied. Their kids were polite, their house was tidy, and their lives seemed, at least from a distance, wonderfully uncomplicated. But behind that perfect exterior, subtle cracks had begun to form. Cracks that were invisible until it was too late. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, Emily had been home for winter break. She came back, quieter than usual, spending more time in her room, often turning down offers from friends to hang out. Her parents chalked it up to college stress, or maybe just the awkward phase of growing up, but Emily was carrying a secret, one she hadn't shared even with her closest friends. Her relationship with Brandon Tyler had ended badly, worse than anyone knew. Brandon wasn't from Greenfield. He lived in a neighboring town and worked as a mechanic at a local garage. The two had met at a community festival the previous spring. He was older, confident, and had a mysterious edge that initially intrigued Emily. For months their relationship blossomed, but Brandon's charm began to sour. He grew controlling, always needing to know where she was, who she was talking to, and why she hadn't responded fast enough. It became suffocating. When Emily finally ended things, she thought that would be the end of it. But something about Brandon's silence in the weeks that followed made her uneasy. He didn't argue. He didn't beg for her back. He simply disappeared from her life. She blocked his number, removed him from social media, and focused on school. But back home for the holidays, something felt wrong. She noticed cars parked too long near the house. Once, she thought she saw someone outside her bedroom window, just past the hedges. Her father laughed it off, blaming raccoons. Her mother, worried, said they should report it, but no one did. What Emily didn't know was that Brandon had been watching. He had been planning. The quiet she thought was a sign of letting go was actually the calm before something unthinkable. He had already made his decision. If he couldn't have her, he would make sure she lost everything that mattered. He knew the family's routines. He knew the layout of the house. He even knew the passcode to the side garage door. And while the Hunt family settled in for a quiet winter break, decorating cookies, watching movies, planning their upcoming ski trip, Brandon Tyler was getting ready. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, just a deep, festering resentment and a desire to leave a mark that would never be erased. By the time anyone realized the danger, it was already too late. Brandon Tyler had always been the kind of man who made strong first impressions. At 21, he had the rugged look of someone older, dark hair that never quite stayed in place, oil-streaked hands from working at the auto shop, and a quiet confidence that drew people in. To Emily Hunt, freshly 18 and just out of high school, Brandon had seemed exciting. He was different from the boys she'd grown up with, rougher, more mysterious, more experienced. That first summer together had felt like a whirlwind. He brought her flowers wrapped in mechanics' paper towels, took her on late-night drives down country roads, and whispered about dreams of leaving their small towns behind. She felt seen. She felt special. But as the leaves began to fall and summer faded into a crisp September, the charm began to wear thin. Emily started college, and with that came new classes, new people, and a sense of freedom. Brandon didn't like it. He asked constant questions. Who were her new friends? Why was she taking so long to reply? Why hadn't she mentioned the guy in her group project? Slowly, his texts turned into demands, and his compliments became criticisms wrapped in concern. By October, the tension was undeniable. Emily found herself hiding parts of her life, editing the truth just to avoid Brandon's temper. He had never hit her, he never even raised his voice. But there was something chilling about the way he'd go quiet when he was upset, the way he'd stare at her with eyes that didn't blink, as if he was waiting for something to break. The final straw came in November. Emily had gone to a Halloween party with a few classmates. She didn't tell Brandon. She knew he'd be furious. But someone tagged her in a photo on social media, and within an hour Brandon had driven to her dorm. He waited outside in the cold for nearly 2 hours before she saw the messages. When she came down, they argued quietly near the parking lot, but neighbors overheard enough to call campus security. Brandon was told to leave, and though no charges were filed, Emily made a choice. She ended the relationship that night, blocking his number and making it clear that it was over, for good. For a brief moment, she felt a sense of relief. She told herself it was just a bad chapter, something to forget, something to move past. What Emily didn't realize was that Brandon had already started to unravel. He showed up at the garage late and left early. He stopped shaving. He barely spoke to coworkers, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. He began driving past the Hunt home at night, parking just far enough away not to be noticed. He knew Emily would be coming home for winter break. He knew she would be surrounded by the people who loved her most, and that enraged him. Brandon had always believed they were meant to be. In his mind, Emily wasn't allowed to walk away. She had promised things, spoken about futures and shared secrets, that he believed bound them together. Her rejection wasn't just a breakup. To Brandon, it was betrayal. 1 week before the murders, Brandon quit his job without notice. He told his landlord he'd be moving out. He began collecting supplies: rubber gloves, a flashlight, a hunting knife, and 2 cans of gasoline. He wrote cryptic notes in a small leather-bound journal, pages filled with ramblings about cleansing fire and making her understand. Meanwhile, Emily returned home to the comfort of her family. She decorated the tree with Sophie, helped her mom bake cinnamon rolls, and stayed up late with Trevor, watching movies from their childhood. The house was filled with laughter and light, but Emily couldn't shake a strange feeling, that sense of being watched, of something just beyond the windows. Her parents reassured her, chalking it up to stress. After all, it was the holidays. She was safe. They were all safe. They had no way of knowing that Brandon was already waiting, watching, planning. And once he set his plan in motion, there would be no turning back. January 14th, 2023, began like any other winter morning in Greenfield. Quiet, cold, and still. A soft blanket of snow had fallen overnight, frosting rooftops and tree branches with a deceptive beauty. Neighbors sipped coffee by their windows, unaware that just down the street something terrible had already happened. At exactly 6:42 a.m., a frantic 911 call came in. A neighbor had spotted smoke rising from the Hunt residence, black and heavy against the pale sky. Firefighters arrived within minutes to find the house nearly engulfed in flames. The heat was so intense it had cracked the windows and peeled paint from nearby fences. As hoses snaked through the yard and axes broke through the doors, responders rushed inside, hoping, praying for survivors. What they found inside stunned even the most seasoned investigators. The fire had originated in the kitchen and spread quickly, fueled by accelerants. But what made the scene all the more disturbing was the discovery that the fire was not the cause of death. Michael Hunt was found in the downstairs hallway with multiple stab wounds. Brenda was in the living room, her body partially burned but clearly lifeless before the flames touched her. In Trevor's bedroom, scorched remains suggested a violent struggle had taken place. Sophie's small frame was discovered in a corner of her room, curled beneath blankets that had somehow been untouched by the fire's worst heat. She, too, had been killed before the fire ever began. Shock rippled through the town. For hours, the family's names were withheld, and rumors raced through social media like wildfire. A gas explosion. A terrible accident. But when officials announced that the Hunts had been murdered, everything changed. Emily, who had returned to her college dorm just the night before, received the call at 8:17 a.m. Her screams could be heard down the hall. Police arrived at her apartment to inform her formally, offering support and immediate protection. She was the only member of her family left alive. And someone had made sure of it. The investigation moved quickly. Arson specialists confirmed the fire had been set using gasoline poured in a deliberate pattern through the kitchen and hallway. A nearly melted red gas can was found in the garage, or telling was the forced entry point. Someone had broken in through the back, a small basement window that had been pried open with a tool. Within hours, detectives reviewed the home's security system. Though the cameras inside the house had been disabled, wires cut cleanly at the source, a neighbor's doorbell camera, offered a vital clue. At 1:13 a.m., a hooded figure was captured walking toward the Hunt residence, head down, face obscured. The person stayed out of view for nearly 20 minutes before retreating into the darkness. Fingerprint teams recovered a partial print from the garage doorknob and another from the kitchen counter. Both matched Brandon Tyler. Investigators immediately declared him a person of interest. When they arrived at Brandon's small apartment later that day, they found the door locked, the blinds drawn, and no sign of him. Inside, a search revealed a chilling collection of items. Printed photos of Emily, some torn or marked with pen, newspaper clippings about fires and revenge killings, and a journal with dozens of pages filled in Brandon's tight, angry handwriting. One page, dated just 3 days before the murders, read, "She took everything, now I'll take it all away." The town of Greenfield, so used to peace and routine, was shaken to its core. The idea that someone could invade a home and wipe out an entire family while the rest of the world slept felt unthinkable. But it had happened, and now the killer was on the run. The media picked up the story quickly, dubbing it the Hunt family murders. Photos of the happy family circulated online, Michael coaching Little League, Brenda reading to students, Trevor with his football team, Sophie in a Halloween costume, and Emily smiling, unaware, the last one standing. As the ashes cooled and the snow kept falling, one question echoed across Greenfield and beyond. Where was Brandon Tyler? And more chilling, what might he do next? The manhunt for Brandon Tyler began as soon as his name was made public. Every news station in Oregon flashed his photograph, unshaven, dark-eyed, and cold. His face became a symbol of horror, plastered across missing posters, news alerts, and digital billboards. Police described him as armed, dangerous, and deeply disturbed. But finding him would prove harder than anyone imagined. When detectives arrived at his apartment the day of the murders, they were already too late. Brandon had vanished. His phone had been powered off since the night of the killings, and his car, a dark green pickup truck, was gone. Inside the apartment, investigators found signs of careful preparation. The duffel bag was missing. The closet was almost empty. A printed map of the Pacific Northwest lay on the floor, marked in red ink with dots scattered across remote areas. The most disturbing discovery came from Brandon's laptop, browsing history that revealed searches like how to survive off the grid, best places to disappear, and manhunt evasion tactics. By the next morning, Brandon's truck was found abandoned off a rural service road near the Oregon-Washington border. Inside were empty food wrappers, muddy boots, and a torn photo of Emily, folded so tightly the creases had started to rip. A worn-out notebook was wedged under the passenger seat, filled with unsettling passages, disjointed rants about betrayal, revenge, and an obsession with purity through destruction. Some pages were just repeated words over and over. She will remember. The location of the truck confirmed what authorities feared. Brandon had escaped into the wilderness. The area was vast. Dense forests, steep mountains, and dozens of backcountry trails. It was a survivalist's dream and a fugitive's perfect hiding place. Local law enforcement joined forces with the FBI. Drones scanned thick canopies. Tracking dogs followed fading scents through the underbrush. Helicopters circled the area, their blades echoing across valleys. But Brandon had a head start, and he knew how to vanish. The search dragged on for weeks. Then, weeks turned into months. Tips flooded in. Someone claimed to have seen him at a gas station outside Tacoma, buying canned beans and batteries. Another tip came from a hiker who spotted a man with a scruffy beard and hollow eyes camping near a waterfall. A stolen food delivery van was later found ditched in a wooded area with footprints leading away, matching Brandon's shoe size. Yet each lead brought investigators no closer to capturing him. Emily, now under 24-hour protection, was relocated to a secure location far from campus. The reality of her family's murders haunted her every minute. She was no longer a student, a sister, or a daughter. She was the girl who lived, the one Brandon hadn't finished with. Authorities feared he would try to contact her, and deep down Emily feared the same. Not because she thought he'd reach out to talk, but because he might come to finish what he started. The public followed every update like a thriller unfolding in real time. Message boards buzzed with theories. Some believed Brandon had died in the woods, taken by the cold or the wild. Others speculated he had crossed into Canada, living under a fake name. A few thought he was watching everything, hidden in plain sight. Then came the most chilling theory of all, that Brandon hadn't run to escape, but to wait. That he was planning something more, something worse. Investigators remained on edge, fully aware that time could either bury a fugitive or embolden one. The Hunt family was gone. Their killer was somewhere out there, driven by obsession, fueled by rage. No one knew when or if he would strike again. Nearly a year had passed since the brutal slaying of the Hunt family, and Brandon Tyler was still missing. To the outside world, the case seemed to grow colder with each passing week. News stations began to reduce their coverage. Posters faded on bulletin boards. Even the online forums slowed down, shifting their focus to newer tragedies. But the investigation never stopped. Law enforcement quietly maintained a task force dedicated solely to tracking Brandon's movements, no matter how faint the trail. They believed he was still alive, and more importantly, they believed he wasn't finished. Emily Hunt was living under a new name in a different state. Her face was rarely seen, even on social media. She didn't attend school anymore. Her days were structured around therapy sessions, security check-ins, and learning how to live a life with invisible borders. Every creak in the floor, every knock at the door sent a chill through her. Brandon had become her ghost, always near, always watching. She never stopped looking over her shoulder. Then, in late November, something happened that shattered the illusion of peace. A package arrived at the police station in Greenfield, addressed to The Last Witness. It had no return address, but the handwriting was instantly familiar to the detectives who had studied Brandon's notes. Inside the box was a small USB drive and a charred fragment of a photo, part of the Hunt family's last Christmas portrait, singed around the edges. Forensics confirmed the photo fragment came from the house after the fire, but it was the contents of the USB that truly disturbed investigators. The drive contained one single video. It was low quality, filmed in near darkness. The footage showed a forest, somewhere remote. A fire crackled off screen, and then, slowly, Brandon stepped into view. His appearance had changed. His beard longer, his face thinner, almost gaunt. But his eyes hadn't. They still held that unnerving calm. He spoke softly, his voice low and composed. He talked about justice, about punishment, about Emily. He said she had betrayed the covenant and walked away from what was meant to be. He ended with one final message, his voice steady, as if he were reading a farewell letter. She thinks she's safe. But I'm patient. Some things are worth waiting for. The video sent shockwaves through the task force. It confirmed what many feared. Brandon was alive, watching, and preparing for something else. Emily was moved again, this time under even stricter protection. She wasn't just a survivor now. She was a target. A new urgency spread through the investigation. They traced the package to a remote post office in northern Idaho. Surveillance footage captured a man with his face obscured by a hoodie mailing it at night. The license plate of the vehicle was unreadable, but the height and build matched Brandon's. It was the closest they'd been in nearly a year. Then, just days before Christmas, another clue emerged. A hiker near Clearwater National Forest reported finding a small, hand-built shelter deep in the woods. Inside were signs of recent activity. Empty food containers, a map with Emily's name written repeatedly, and a plastic bag containing newspaper clippings of her old school photo. But Brandon was gone. Again. The shelter discovery reignited the search, and teams poured into the forest. For weeks they combed through miles of terrain, but every time they got close, it seemed Brandon was already 2 steps ahead. To this day, Brandon Tyler remains a fugitive. The FBI has placed him on their most wanted list with a $250,000 0-cents reward for information leading to his arrest. But he has not been seen since. Emily Hunt continues to live in hiding, her every day shaped by fear and vigilance. The Hunt family murders remain one of the most haunting crimes in Oregon's history, not only because of the brutality, but because the story was never truly finished. Somewhere out there, a man who turned rejection into revenge is still waiting, watching, planning. And the world holds its breath, knowing that until Brandon Tyler is found, the nightmare will never truly end.